Starting recording and transcription. Okay, how about that? So this is hopefully the continuation and end of the fortune teller project that was started yesterday that was abruptly ended by my lack of proper computer equipment. So let's try this. I'm recording this on Teams. I hope I figure out how to share it so that everybody has access to it. So I'm going to my CodePen since that's where I got started, and it tells me that my last project that I saved was Fortune Teller. Click on that. And although this is not my favorite layout, it doesn't really matter because our text that will be displayed is not that extensive, so it should fit in this space below. I'm going to rearrange some things. First of all, I'm going to zoom in to get larger text. That way I can see it better. Hopefully you can see it better. I'm going to mess here with the width of the columns. And now I have my basic HTML, very basic HTML on the left side. And then I have my very basic JavaScript code on the right side. Something that we did yesterday was basically, okay, well, we're dealing with variables and we declared multiple variables. If I remember correctly, and this is going to be on eCampus, what you need to do is you need to develop a code and a script in JavaScript that will display fortune for the user. You're the one that's deciding what the fortune values will be. I started real simple with things that I know. I don't have 3 kids, but that was just a random number to put there, so I'll just change that to 0. Spouse, Michelle, the city where I will live will be Dallas, and the job will be teacher. Once again, this is a game for kids, something that they might imagine. We have been using, or I have been using, console.log, which actually displays toward the console. The string U will be A, and it takes the value from the job variable, which has been declared currently as teacher. My city is Dallas, and well, I'm just repeating what I just said. The string continues and says comma and married to the variable with variable kids. So this is pretty much, I mean, it's a fortune, quote unquote, but it's predetermined. We're just going to try to make it a little bit more lively. You may have noticed that there's nothing appearing in our space, in our page so far, at least not as I was typing it. And that's because I'm using a console.log, which actually displays to the console. Since I'm in CodePen, I can look at the console output and see that by assigning a few variables, in this case, 0 kids, Michelle's a spouse, Dallas a city, teacher the job, I should be able to see the output on the console. And maybe, oh, there you go. Just not have enough space there. But you can tell here, you will be a teacher in Dallas and married to Michelle with 0 kids in this case. So the console is fine if you're doing a certain kind of programming. Here we're developing a web page, right? So this is the web page space. It's blank. The correct code, and it should be in the notes. If it's not, I'll be sure to add it. Rather than displaying this in the console, I'm going to use the command document write. So it's document dot write, and then this should actually display then onto the HTML screen. You will be a teacher in Dallas and married to Michelle with 0 kids. Now, it wouldn't be a good fortune teller if it only had 1 fortune to tell. Now, don't look at this as a real quote unquote fortune teller. Think of it more of a fortune cookie, something that's already predetermined, it's already printed, that you might get as a fortune. So let's try something else. Since I already have this, you will be a teacher in Dallas, because I have those variables going. Well, how can I make this a little bit better? The title of the page is already your fortune. Let me get rid of the space just to give me a little bit more space. And do the same thing with the blank space there. Inside of the body of the HTML page, I will add in a header, and I'll make this a header 1, just to make it large there, H1, and announce that this is your fortune. close the heading with the /H1. And now I see your fortune, H1, pretty big over here. It says you will be a teacher in Dallas and married to Michelle with 0 kids. So how do I get more fortunes other than the one that I have just now? I'm going to delete another black space just to give me a little more space. Well, I already have this for my settings on a variable. Now, variables are limited to the one thing that you want them to be. We're going to talk a little bit, I guess, just about a different kind of variable. Well, it's not a different kind of variable. It's just a different way of handling variables. We're going to be talking about arrays. And arrays in the material that I have shared with you so far, you should be able to find some more information. I'm going to do my favorite search, which is W3 Schools, and followed by the language, JavaScript, and then the thing I'm looking for, arrays. An array right there. So it tells me W3 Schools, I'll go to it, and it tells me that JavaScript arrays are used to store multiple values in a single variable. So as I told you, a single variable, so far we've been using it to hold one value. An array can be used to store multiple values. See how they have the variable called cars? And then they have different kinds of cars. These are all in strings, string Saab, string Volvo, string BMW. They're separated by the comma, and most importantly, they're all encased in brackets. So I would invite you to look up JavaScript arrays. Your book also has information about this. I'm going to go back to my code so that then I can actually put an array into function. I already created a variable. Let's start, although these are in the wrong order, I guess. It says you're a teacher in Dallas, married to Michelle with 0 kids. So it should be job, city, spouse, and number of kids. Doesn't really matter, but just to make things easier as I'm programming, I'm going to rearrange the spacing here, or actually rearrange the order of how I'm defining the variables. I'm going to say then start with a job as opposed to end with job. I'm going to cut that, put in the top. If you haven't begun to type, you should type something like this as you go along. Or then city should be the second one. This will make a lot more sense when the arrays come in. The number of kids, I do believe, is the last thing. So, all about priorities. There you go. So you will be a teacher in Dallas, married to Michelle with 0 kids. Document.write will then take that information and output it, and that's what CodePen is doing for us. So now, like I said, since we're using arrays, we can have multiple values arranged into the single variable. So if I'm going to be a teacher, I can be other things, right? I could have been something else. I could have been a contender instead of the bum, which is what I am. I'm saying that that's a line from an old movie. Never mind me, I'm just rambling. Okay, so as explained in the W3 School sample, you have brackets, and then you have multiple values encased within it inside of quotes, meaning they are strings. They could also be numbers. Let's start with the first string. I'm going to start with the bracket. CodePen thinks it's doing me a favor by closing the bracket right away. I need to get rid of that one and put it at the end. So I have one value, teacher. Right after the quote in teacher, I can put in a comma to separate the value and say, well, I could have been a designer. In the following string, right after the quote, I can put a comma and say I could have been a journalist, and make sure that the strings are actually inside of quotes. Move that out of the way, and then finally, comma, quote, and one more thing, I could have been a programmer. This semicolon doesn't need to be inside of the bracket. Actually, it could be outside. It should be outside. So now I have an array that has 1, 2, 3, 4 separate values. Teacher, designer, let me spell that correctly, a journalist, and programmer. Let me spell designer correctly. when I was in Designer, we actually had editors that helped us. Same thing's going to happen with the rest of the variables. So let's start with the city. I'm going to first of all put in the bracket, which should be a square bracket. Accidentally press Shift. I'm going to encase that there at the end. Michelle is name of one possible spouse. And then 0 is the possible number of kids that has been set here. So I have teacher, designer, journalist, programmer, and all I did with the rest, I need to fix this. Make sure that you're using square brackets with your arrays and the quotes inside to display the strings, that is words or values that have letters and those kinds of characters as opposed to just numbers. Like the number of kids is actually a different type of variable. This is a number. You can tell that they're different because the CodePen is actually displaying them in different colors. Let's come up with some more alternatives to Dallas. I could have lived in, I'll put in a comma and encase inside quote, Houston. And then I'll put a comma, encase in quotes, Lubbock. And finally separate with a comma the final string, and I'll put in the last city, McAllen. Michelle is the first possibility. We'll put a comma after that string, and let's just come up with some names and say Valerie, comma, and put whatever names you can think of. A comma to separate the string, and I'll just put in at the end. So I have 4, 4, and 4 values for job, city, spouse, and number of kids. Number of kids, well, I mean, it's, I don't know. I'll just put in random numbers as they come to me. I'll just say, well, there's 0, there could be 3, there could be 5, there could be 1. Notice how your fortune keeps on saying the same thing. You'll be teacher, designer, journalist, programmer in Dallas, Houston, Lubbock, McAllen, and married to Michelle, Valerie, Melissa, Lily with 0, 3, 5, 1 kids. It's giving me the value of the whole array because the array holds all those values. Good thing for us is that because these variables are saved as arrays, that each one of these is encased in a different location. So what do I mean by that? I mean that arrays have a value that starts with 0. That would be the very first value, although, okay, so the first value is actually 0. The location is the first, 3 is the second, 5 is the third, and 1 is the fourth. The computer counts this as 0, 1, 2, 3. So I need to come up with a way of saying, well, give me the first value, and that should be 0. So if I want to give me the first values for job, I can say that job bracket 0. Notice how the display then should change. You will be a teacher as opposed to all of them. It's telling me city, Dallas, because that's actually telling me everything, Dallas, Houston, Lubbock, McAllen. Let's see the first value. City bracket 0 should then change to Dallas, and it does. Married to, spouse, same thing, bracket 0, and then with num kids, bracket 0. So this page will always be the same because it's always going to give me the very first value. It's going to say teacher, Dallas, Michelle, 0. But I really wanted to get something else. I wanted to get journalist, Lubbock, Melissa, and 5. Not really 5, that's a lot of kids. So how do I get it to give me those? Well, I would have to change the number from 0 to 1, 2, or 3. That being the first, second, and third place of the, actually the fourth place of the array. Something I can do, and I might put this on the notes, or maybe you're good enough to see what I'm doing. Well, not right now. I'm actually going to do a search also W3 schools, and I'll say, okay, W3 schools, how about JavaScript random number? I'll go to that page. It gives me some samples. Random integers is what we want. Integers being numbers that are whole numbers. So like 0, 1, 2, and 3, which would be 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the real world, is what we want. We want those types of integers. It tells me that in order to get a random integer from 0 to 9, I would have to do this math. It says, okay, so do a math.floor, which is a floor number. It's going to be a number of all kinds of values. And there's more information about this in the page. And actually using the method random. It's going to be multiplied by 10 so that it can get a number between 0 and 9. 0 because that's where it starts to look. 9 because it's 10 is beyond the scope of what we need. 9 encompasses inside. So if we wanted to find the number between 1, actually 0, and 3, we would need to do a math random times 4, I would guess. I'm just going to copy. You could copy this code or you could type it out. Inside of the code, we now have enough here to get things going to where we are. I'm going to generate a new variable. And I will just call that variable. Well, I could use X. I could use whatever it is, just make it descriptive. You can't use random because that's too much like the function. So I don't know. I don't want to use fortune because this assignment, after all, is going to be about writing a function, and the function will be called fortune. So I'm going to stick with XX just because it's an X factor that we're dealing with, and that's going to be equal to, according to our page here, math.floor, math random, and then times whatever the number we're looking for. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do math. Case is important, so it's a capital M for math, dot floor, parentheses, capital MATH, and dot random. That will be a number to be determined later, so we have empty parentheses. And we will multiply this times, the sample was times 9, 4 times 10, so it can get between 0 and 9. We're going to do ours times 4, so that we can get a value between 0 and 3. Nothing's happening in your fortune because it's still stuck to 0. So what I want to do is then, at some point, instead of 0, let's call XX on job, city XX, married to spouse XX, with number of kids XX. You will be an undefined, in undefined, and married to undefined with undefined kids. So I gotta say that's pretty funny. Where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? Oh, well, yeah. I said that this is going to be about a function. I have not done the function yet. So XX is undefined because variable XX is at the bottom, so it's the very end, and it hasn't has not read that information yet. What if we put this above here? Variable XX is equal to that. So it does that for me the one time. Every time that the page is loaded, I will be a teacher in Dallas and married to Michelle with 0 kids. If I were to reload this, then I'd get something else. Rather than doing that, I mean, before we do that, let's do the function. After all, that's what we're here for. So we already have a function, basically. The document.write, you will be all this, etc., etc. That should be our function. So let's define the function. I'm going to add myself a little bit more space here, and I will define the function with the keyword function. So function, I'm going to call this one fortune. You call it something else. Fortune works for me. And it's going to be depending on the stuff that we're putting out there. You will be a job at city, married to spouse, with so many kids, num kids, right? So the function will then depend by calling all of these variables. It will call a job, comma, it will call a city, it will call a spouse, and lastly, we'll call number of kids with a capital K. and you will be a job XX in city XX. And I think the XX, actually, I went a little bit too far there. It worked when we did the random number and set it up right away. But since we're now doing a function and we have, after all this stuff, why is this not the way we want to go? Document.o. Well, for one thing, it's not the way I want to go because I'm writing this function without giving it the brackets that it needs to live in. So actually the function open curly braces, and then at the very bottom I should close with the curly braces as well, saying the fortune that will depend on job, city, spouse, and the number of kids will be that it's going to write that you will be a job XX, and I don't know that I need the XX, to tell you the truth. You'll be a job in city and married to spouse with number of kids. So where do the random numbers come into play? I was getting a little bit ahead of myself from my notes. Actually, we have defined the function. We have defined a random variable, but we have not called the function. It's not enough to just say, oh, I have a function. Now we have to tell JavaScript to actually use it. And we do that by just calling out the name of the function. In this case, it's fortune. And it will depend on job, city, spouse, and the number of kids. If anything changes, you'll see that we're still getting everything, all the values, because at this point, fortune's just saying, well, I'm getting job and I'm getting city, spouse, and number of kids. As far as it knows, it's all of these things. So now is where we actually bring in the dimension of the variable. Job should be XX, which is going to be the random number that it picks. The city is going to be the same random number, city XX, and the spouse XX, and finally number of kids is XX. And now I have a fortune that says you'll be a journalist in Lubbock, married to Melissa with 5 kids, which I still insist is a lot of kids. In the meantime, CodePen is thinking about it. I think that it will reload this eventually. I did a search earlier. Don't ask me. Let me see if I can find it in my history. I'm going to do a search for JavaScript button reload page. And Stack Overflow is a pretty good source for these kinds of questions. And let's see if there's a button that we can use and add here. And I think that this is one that worked for me before. You can have on-click or history or the window location. And let's try the last one here. Basically, it's going to put in a button in the page, which is a good hint that if it's got a button that it's going to be inside the HTML. And the HTML so far is just saying your fortune, and then it's going to be calling, actually it's calling all this stuff, and I forgot something that's essential. It's telling me this, and I'm not exactly sure why it's telling me everything. I have not called the script. I've said that this is your fortune, but it should be calling the script, and this will be important when you actually publish the page because it's pulling the script straight from the CodePen document. But it should say, hey, go get the script now. So that will be bracket open script, bracket close script. You will be a journalist in Lubbock and married to Melissa with 5 kids. After all of that, and your fortune plus the actual fortune, I would like to add that code that I just got, which is going to be the button. And let me see if that works. I'll paste it here so I have the script and then the button, and it tells me to refresh the page. You will be the senator in Houston, married to Valerie with 3 kids. I refresh page, and nothing happened right away, but it did eventually. Teacher in Dallas, married to Michelle. Reload program in McAllen. So I'm getting multiple values as I'm refreshing the page. Was that clear as mud? So the code is pretty straightforward. We have an array that has all the jobs. It's called job. It has 4 values. City, same thing. Spouse, number of kids, same thing. They differ in that all the first 3 have strings and the last one has numbers. They're all variables after all. We define the variable XX that's going to be a random number between 0 and 3. So we multiply the randomness out there times 4. It starts looking at 0. It will end before it gets to 4. So it's 0 to 3. Then we have a function that's been defined as fortune rather. That's what it's called. It will depend on job, city, spouse, number of kids to write out a message using those values. Then the fortune is called, and then we apply the random number that was selected to it. So the HTML is minimal. We do have your fortune, the title at the top. Your fortune is H1, it's just a heading to display this. And then finally we have a button to reload the whole page. Now I'm going to save this before I lose it. So the pen has been saved. What do I do with this? Well, I want to publish it, right? So I'm going to go to GitHub, and I don't know what page am I in. I have too many GitHub pages. I'm going to sign in, and I think that this is actually WeAreIDT. And so yes, I'm here. Don't remember. And I did one page here before, week 6. I'm going to create a new page and create a page inside of a new folder called week 7. Add file by creating a new file. The new folder is going to be week 07. If you already have a week 07, make sure that you're inside of the correct folder. And I will call this JavaScript. Oh, no, I'll call it fortune. What am I talking about? .html. Or should I call it something else? You know what? I don't have anything else right now in this folder, so I'll stick to fortune. I will then put in the index from CodePen, HTML. I'll copy that, paste it here, and then I have this JavaScript on the side. I'm going to highlight all that, copy it, and I'm going to go back to my WeAreIDT.github, my week 7 folder. I can now commit this so that it's there, commit the new file. I'm going to create a new file, add file by creating the new file. And let's call this one, well, I already have a file called fortune. Could this be, I don't want to call it script. What do we call it? We can call it, oh, no, function is too much like the keyword. I'm going to call it future. Future.js. And I'll dump in the code with all the variables that I defined, etc. And that's correct, all that. Well, I mean, it's the same thing that I just typed in. I'm going to save this. And I'm going to go back inside of fortune. How can I get a JavaScript file to work inside an HTML file? So I'm going to say call JavaScript file from HTML. W3 Schools tells me that there is a script attribute. You have noticed that in my page, I just said script open, script close, because it knows where the script is. It's inside the same system here. It's inside of this page. But we have now created a new page, and it's called something else. Would you believe me if I told you I already forgot? It's called future.js. And then it says script source is whatever the name of the file is, .js. So source is equal to, we said it's fortune.h. This should be, no, well, this is fortune HTML. The other one should be future.js, and that's what it is. Let's just say then that we're going to be calling from within index in the script. Let's edit it first. You can use whatever IDE you have already been using. It's a lot easier and faster in GitHub because it's already there. So I'll say script, space and say that the source src is equal to quote future.js. Larger, there's the code for the HTML. It's an HTML document. HTML begins, it ends at 12. The head contains the title, your fortune. The body has a heading that says your fortune. It calls the script that runs the fortune itself, and then we have a button that reloads the page. Pretty simple page, pretty simple script. I'll commit that. And then, since I always forget, I always have to go back to the cat and go directly to my repository and look at the settings. When I first published this a long time ago, it should be simpler because I think this is actually at weirdit.github.io. And it is. So pages, it should tell me the same thing. weirdit. Well, actually, that's a separate page. So never mind. You should be in weirdit or whatever your username is, .github.io. I created a new folder that was called week 07. And then there was a file inside of that, and it was called JavaScript. Call your pages whatever you want. Was it JavaScript or was it Fortune? That was the other file. weirdit.github.io/week7 JavaScript HTML. It's incorrect. I may have mistyped something. It's been a long day. It's been a long week. Let's see, GitHub. And look at my code again. ITSC for, oh. Well, this is the wrong one. I'm glad I'm recording this. That should be just github.com. I tell you, it's always so problematic to have multiple accounts. And it's this week 07. We have fortune.html. Is that what I was looking for? Nope. It's fortune.html. Your fortune. It's not giving me anything. Refresh page. It's nothing there. Let's look at the source. It says title is your fortune, which was it telling me that? It is. It's up here on the tab. And then it says your fortune, which we see, but we don't see the actual fortune. It's calling the script. The SCR should be the SRC. I'm going to change the HTML to make sure that that is correct. And this is how I learned to program, making lots of mistakes. Future.js, that's the end of the script, and the button comes up. Commit the changes. And hopefully it'll do it in the next 30 seconds or so. If I reload that, it's not giving me anything right away. I'm going to go back over here. I think that this is already saved, and that's fine. Go back to your fortune. Let me view the page source. It still has SCR. Like I said, oh, there's SRC. Let's reload this. Your fortune, you will be a designer in Houston married to Valerie with 3 kids. Refresh the page. You will be a teacher in Dallas married to Michelle with 0 kids. Refresh page, etc., etc. And hopefully I get different things all the time. And if you can make this code better, that'd be great. I'm sure you can. You can add CSS to the page to make this a little bit better looking than what it is. If you want to get super complex, by all means do that. Remember, this is very simple. It's got your very basic HTML page and a very simple JavaScript that makes the magic happen inside. Actual magic, since we are actually previewing somebody's future or possible future. Does it have to happen? Hopefully not with 5 kids. So thanks for watching. I'm going to figure out how to stop the recording. That's always fun. How does Teams work? What does it do? Oh, seriously, how do you stop it? It's always a fun day on Friday.